students, and welcome to World War I Lecture 3, The End of the War. Can you believe it? We're already there. Please have your accompanying notes ready. It's a graphic organizer you need to fill out. Don't forget there are 2 definitions on there as well. And make sure you pause and restart this lecture as necessary. And feel free to go back and rewind and replay where you need it. After 4 long years of war, President Wilson started working on the 14 points. These were his ideas about a plan for peace. No one in Europe had thought about what would happen at the end of the war. They didn't know what they wanted or how things would work out. Wilson was the one who started thinking about these things and started writing them down, and they ended up in 14 points. Wilson put these out, and then the European allies ended up having different opinions on what should take place when the war ended. Let's quickly review. The allies were Great Britain, France, Belgium, Serbia, Russia, and the United States. And then you have the Central Powers on the other side. You have Germany, you have the Ottoman Empire, you have Austria-Hungary, and Bulgaria. And so all of these countries were going to factor in to writing the peace that would take place after World War I. In many ways, the peace discussions of World War I end up setting up World War II. Wilson's 14 points, and I'm going to read to you a few right now. The 14 points is defined as a peace plan prepared by the United States President Wilson at the end of World War I. It called for the formation of the League of Nations. Several of Wilson's points are: he wanted open diplomacy and discussions between all nations on international disagreements. That was his first point. His third point was he wanted free trade. Fourth point, he said that nations must give an advance notice before they start to militarize. He wants to prevent militarism, which was one of the causes of the war. His seventh point was that Belgium will be left alone and restored to its original size and position between France and Germany, because at the end of the war, it was occupied by both France and Germany. And so Belgium was to be returned to the Belgians. The 10th point, the people of the Austro-Hungarian Empire would be free to decide what country they wanted to belong to. And so the empire would be broken down into many smaller nations. 13. An independent Poland, in which the people of the Polish ethnicity would be allowed to form from the rest of the German Empire. And they would also be allowed to have access to the sea. And his final point, the 14th point, called for the League of Nations. This would be, in his words, a general association of nations must be formed under specific covenants for the purpose of affording mutual guarantees of political independence and territorial integrity to great and small states alike. He wanted to form a group with representatives from each nation to come and discuss international problems before they would escalate to the level of a world war. The participants of World War I never wanted it to happen again. It was referred to as the Great War at the time, or the war to end all wars, not World War I. They all hoped it would never happen again. The peace discussions took place at a French palace called Versailles. Versailles is located just a few miles outside of Paris. And here at the top I have a picture of what it looks like in the modern day, and at the bottom is a painting of it from the past. It is a huge and beautiful palace, very ornate in the interior and exterior. Wilson and his European counterparts had very different opinions on how to establish the peace. The Big Three is what they were called, and their names were Clemenceau, he's on the left, Woodrow Wilson, who's in the center, and David Lloyd George from Britain, who's on the right, and Clemenceau was from France. These were the three who were driving the peace negotiations because, as we previously mentioned, the Allied forces won the war. When you win the war, you usually get to set the peace terms. And so these three were considered the most powerful in the peace negotiations. Wilson wanted things one way, Clemenceau and David Lloyd George wanted things a different way. They thought Wilson was a little bit out of touch because the United States was not completely devastated by the war, as France, Great Britain, Germany, and the other Central Power and Allied powers were. Their countrysides were devastated by the trenches and the bombings and the deaths, and it was not a good place. And so France and Britain wanted Germany to pay for this. Now you need to continue on your graphic organizers. And don't forget to pause as necessary in order to fill them in. You'll see that on the organizer, it will say Wilson's belief on the one side, and then it will say the Allies' belief on the other side. And then you had a definition at the top you needed to fill in. And so make sure you pause at any point if you need to continue to fill in the answers. So here we go. Okay. Wilson's belief was that a peace should be created without placing the blame on any one country. He thought that these nations should mutually take the blame, everyone, allies, Central Powers included, and that a peace should be created that was, equivocal for all. The European allies, France and Great Britain especially, believed that the Germans should be punished. You need to punish the Germans. They should be made responsible for the war, and that's the end of the story. They would not hear what Wilson had to say. So what ended up in the peace treaty? Well, Great Britain and France won this one, and Germany had to take full responsibility for the war. Germany was very unhappy and viewed this as very unfair. They thought that they were being put down in a situation that they should not have been put down in, and that many nations should have taken responsibility. Should Germany pay for the war? This is your next Wilson's belief. Wilson's belief, Germany should not have to pay harsh reparations, and reparations are payments made by the loser in a war to the winners. Okay? So Wilson said Germany should not have to. European allies said Germany needs to pay for the entire war. End of story. They owe France for the destruction of its countryside. They owe Britain for the money it had to spend on their military, and they owe Belgium for destroying their countryside as well. What ended up in the peace treaty? Germany had to pay billions of dollars in reparations to the Allied forces. Again, do you think Germany's going to be very happy or very upset about this? Probably very upset, because they're going to have to pay billions of dollars, and they have to take the blame for the entire war. Next, what happened to the empires that lost the war? Well, remember Austria-Hungary? They lost and they were completely destroyed. Wilson's belief was that nations and ethnic groups should be able to decide for themselves what country they wanted to be. European allies believed that the Central Powers should lose land control of foreign nations and give up all territories. So those ones are pretty much in line with each other there. What's in the peace treaty? There are several nations created from the former lands of the German Empire and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The British Empire is untouched because they won the war. The nations of Poland, and we'll see them on the map next, Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia are created from these former lands, as well as several other little countries. Okay. All right, the new Europe. Compare this with your original color-coded map of Europe. It looks very different. The German Empire, which used to be all the way through here, is now divided into Germany, Poland, East Prussia. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, which used to be through all of here, is now Czechoslovakia, a much smaller nation of Hungary, a much smaller nation of Austria, and the country of Yugoslavia right here that combined the former Serbia and all of those Slavic groups that wanted to be a part of Serbia. As you notice, France is the same size, Great Britain is the same size because they won the war. Serbia actually got a lot bigger. It's just referred to as Yugoslavia now and encompasses several other ethnic groups. Okay. Now back to your graphic organizer. What about the League of Nations? Wilson stated in his 14th point that a League of Nations, a peacekeeping organization, should be formed. European allies agreed with this. They thought that an organization should be formed to help nations solve their differences peacefully so that a war like this would never happen again. Alright, a League of Nations was added to the Treaty of Versailles. That's what they named the peace treaty after World War I because it was developed at the Palace of Versailles. And it was signed in Versailles' most beautiful room, the Hall of Mirrors. And here it is. Notice there are mirrors along one wall and there are windows along the other wall. And there are beautiful paintings on the ceiling and chandeliers of crystal and glass all throughout the room. Here's an image of all the leaders in Europe signing a peace treaty. Now think about this question and we'll discuss it in class. Is Germany happy with this peace treaty? Do you think Austria is happy with this peace treaty? Or Hungary? Or the Ottoman Empire? Do the Central Powers feel like they were treated fairly in this peace? And finally, at the bottom, I want you to answer why the U.S. did not join the League of Nations. And you might say, well, it was Woodrow Wilson's idea. Shouldn't the U.S. join it? Well, in the United States, you have 3 branches of government. Congress, like I told you before, has to approve going to war. So Wilson had to go to Congress and ask for approval to enter World War I on the side of the Allies. Now, Wilson went and hammered out this peace treaty with Europe, and he comes back to Congress and says, will you approve this treaty? He can't just approve it. Congress has to approve it. And Senate, the upper house in Congress, refused to ratify the Treaty of Versailles. They did not want to be involved in the League of Nations, and they wanted to form a different treaty with Germany, one that was less harsh. They did not support this treaty. And so Wilson, in a way, failed at solving the peace. The League of Nations ends up falling apart because the United States didn't join in. And we are setting the stage right here for World War II. See you in class. Tomorrow, make sure you have all of your notes filled out. Please rewind and go back to anything you feel like you may have missed. And we will have a discussion in class the day that this assignment is due. Have a good evening.